We're going to go ahead and get started. Want to mosey on over to a seat. I don't have a handout for you this week because the zooming we're going to do will be directly out of two fairly short passages. So I figured I could make you actually look it up in the Bible this week. If you want to get ahead on the game, you can find Genesis chapter 44, verse 18. That's where we'll look at eventually. Try to take a few minutes here to review. I know last week went really fast. We had a very short amount of time, and I do apologize. In general, the class is moving pretty quick, trying to cover the substance of the Old Testament in just 1 year's worth of Bible study is probably a foolhardy endeavor on my part. But try to keep in mind, the goal here is not to walk away from this an Old Testament scholar. The goal is to be able to see the connection point between Genesis chapter 3 and Matthew chapter 28. How do we get from God creating the heaven and the earth and it breaking by man to where we are today? Now, in our creed, we don't say much about it. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus Christ. Oh, well, whoa. Like, how do we get there? How do we get to Jesus? Yeah? It's a long trip, and so what we're trying to do is to build these pieces, and then also see, though, well, the first mention of Jesus is right there in Genesis chapter 3. So everything after this is about Jesus Christ our Lord, the seed who was born of woman, right? Conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of the Virgin Mary. So it is right there in the creed. Then there's all of these hops and skips and jumps through the Old Testament where this covenant, this promise that we're given, gets added to and added to and added to and added to. Those are pluses, not X's. Not that he creates a new promise, but that the promise gets more and more clear. There's more pieces to it that will enable us to see it when it happens. So, from the blood sacrifices that came apparently out of the promise to Adam and Eve, to the sign in the sky by which God remembers of Noah's rainbow, right? That I will give you I will put a visible thing somewhere that when I, God, see it, I will remember what I've said, right? To the promise of the land and the promise of children given to Abraham. Let's do Noah, Abraham, right? That this is going to happen in a particular land for the sake of all the land of the entire earth, and that this will result in more children for Abraham than the stars in the sky, which we know from Galatians that these children are not simply children of his flesh, children born of Abraham's blood, but children of faith, reborn by the Spirit. And so we also begin to see, especially with Abraham, but also with Noah, this movement that we keep talking about as the heroes of the simul. The simultaneously saint and sinner people who are Christianity. So that Noah, righteous among all in his generation, by grace through faith, is nonetheless a drunk. Right? And Abraham, again, called out and believing God's promise the moment it's spoken, so that that's reckoned to him as righteousness, nonetheless takes the very woman who he's told this promise is going to come through, and he marries her to another man. And then he has relations with another woman who's not her, and has a son by her, right? So while he is a believer, he's an unbeliever. Right? He's struggling with not just sin in the sense of, don't do that, it's wrong, but sin in the deeper sense of, God spoke it and I don't believe it, which is our common human problem that we all face regularly. Last week, in our hyperdrive, look at Jacob/Israel, who again, I know it didn't come through as clear as it could have, but his name change from deceiver to God fights, implying God not fights just against you, but fights for you. Here you have the saint and the sinner in his name. That he is one who, at the one hand, is constantly tricking everybody and grabbing at people's heels for his own personal gain, and on the other hand, eventually can't but submit to God. God won't let him not let God fight for him. And he breaks him to make it happen. And so he comes limping toward his brother Esau as the sun rises with a wound that God himself gave him, and by that wound he is protected from Jacob's wrath. Today, we're going to look at not a new piece of the covenant exactly, but the best, I think, type in the Old Testament. Remember, typology, I don't know why I never just explained it this way before. When you see that word typology, just think foreshadowing. That's all it really means, from type to anti-type. Not as if anti-type is bad, but from foreshadowing to fulfillment. Only, unlike your fiction novel, this foreshadowing actually happened. Right? This is real history in which God foreshadows what will happen here at the cross. And Joseph has so many of these things going on in his life. The picture that he paints is just phenomenal of who this man Jesus will be. Now, we're going to zoom in toward the end of the story, but we got some space between here and here. If you recall, when Jacob, Israel, I skipped one. That should have been back here. That's all right. When we talked about Jacob seeing Esau, and he puts his family on one side of the river and he stays back on the other side of the river, at that point in time, he has 11 of his 12 sons. He has everybody except for Benjamin. So even Joseph is born at that point. After this, Rachel becomes pregnant. One more time, Rachel is the woman that Jacob really loves. Becomes pregnant one more time. It is Benjamin, another son, and she dies while giving birth to him. And so Jacob is bereaved of his love, and doubly so then Joseph and Benjamin become sort of even more special to him than the other brothers. There is a moment that goes by pretty quickly. It's just like 2 verses before the real story of Joseph starts, where Reuben, not the sandwich, but the firstborn, I just don't know, to try to read between the lines is really interesting here. He makes a pretty bad decision. He decides that his father's concubine is for him. And whether this was because Jacob was so old and was simply not fulfilling his conjugal duty to a younger concubine who was just a couple years older than Reuben himself, and so whatever romance happened there, or whether it was far more irrational than that. You can kind of see the story in it, though. Younger woman, older man with another man that she's attracted to, like Camelot, right? Lancelot and Guinevere. In any case, Reuben defiles his father's bed. And this is going to come back later. This is why he is not given the promise through him, the covenant heir that the seed will pass through him. Similarly, the next 2 oldest, and I'm going to forget the second one. Is it Simeon? And off the top of my head, I'm not going to get it. Is it Levi? Really? I can't remember. What happens is they have a sister named Dinah. And they're living nearby another group of people, and one of the men, a prince among the people, sees her, and he doesn't just woo her. It appears he rapes her. After this, he does fall in love with her, and he wants her to be his. And so he goes to the family and says, come, marry into us, become one people with us. Well, the brothers aren't real excited about this. Obviously, their sister was just defiled in a very horrible way. Well, Jacob says, there's this thing we have to do as a people. If we're going to be one people with you, then we have to have this sign, which I should have added over here, a new sign of circumcision added to the body of all males in this people group. And so they convince this entire city to have every male among them circumcised, all for their prince to marry this woman. Well, Simeon and, did you find it? Who is it Levi? We'll try Levi. We'll catch it at the end if I'm wrong. Simeon and Levi get this idea. When you're circumcised as an adult, about 3 days later, you feel kind of sick, and you can't really walk. And so they get this idea, we're going to take a couple of swords and just go in, and while they're all lying there sick, unable to walk, we'll kill them. And they did. They went and they killed the entire city. Everybody there. All the men. And when Jacob hears about this, he's just livid. You've made me a stench in the nostrils of all peoples. Everyone's gonna come and attack us because they're going to think we're betrayers, because we are. We've betrayed. As a result of this, they also do not receive the covenant blessing. So that when we get to the end, and we should hopefully get there today, and see Jacob laying his hands upon each one of his sons, giving them a blessing, he passes over Reuben and over Simeon and over Levi to the next in line, Judah, fourthborn. And Judah becomes the one through whom the promises are given. Judah is fairly important in this story as well. So meanwhile, Jacob is favoring Joseph, and if you've seen the musical, the play, you know this story so well. The musical really does a good job of getting the heart of this story. Jacob is favored, and to show this, Joseph is favored, and to show this, Jacob gives Joseph a many-colored coat. And was it a rainbow? I don't know. But it's kind of cool, son of the promise here, right? Son of the sign. This coat, nonetheless, would have been very expensive. This is before you could drive down to Kohl's and buy any color shirt that you want for $30. To have dyes to make materials anything other than gray and brown would have been costly. And then to have them woven together so that it's more than one color, this is a king's garment or better. And he gives it to this young boy amongst his brothers. This young boy who also happens to be something of a prophet, a dreamer, and a loudmouth. So this kid has had a couple of dreams that he decides to share with his brothers and his family. One dream has him and his brothers binding together sheaves of wheat, and then their sheaves of wheat bow down on the ground to his, face first and prostrate. What do you think, brothers? Pretty cool, huh? And then next, he has a dream where there are 12 stars in the sky and sun and moon, and all of them bow down to him, or bow down to one star, which is Joseph's star. So he tells that one to Jacob. Hey, Jacob, I had a dream. Hey, Jacob, hey, Dad, I had a dream. 11 stars for my brothers and the sun for you, and you all bowed down to me. What do you think, Dad? Pretty cool, huh? God must be saying this. Joseph doesn't really do a lot of sin, although there's some hints of wrath later in the story. But this would be, as a young Christian, he just doesn't know when to keep his mouth shut about truth. And it gets him into trouble. He's already not liked by his brothers. So one day, his brothers are out taking care of the sheep. Why is he not out there with them, I wonder? Maybe he has special privileges. But he's told to go take them lunch. He goes out to take them lunch, and they see him coming, and they say, here he is. We can see him coming. We could get rid of him. And they do. They grab him. They throw him in a pit. The word for pit, by the way, in Hebrew is sheol. It's also the word for death. So now we have the son of the sign of remembrance thrown into the pit of death. That should ring a bell. We'll come back to that. And throw him into a pit. They're thinking about killing him. Reuben, however, does himself well at this point. He speaks up and he says, well, maybe we could sell him and not kill him. And Judah kind of pipes in as well. And so they stop the murder from happening. And just at this time, they see a caravan of traders going by, including a hairy bunch of Ishmaelites, as the song goes. Kind of going a bit quickly, though, Ishmaelites. Who's Abraham's other son? Ishmael. We're only 2 generations removed from this. Remember the promises to Ishmael, that he too will be a great nation. And here they are, traders heading down to Egypt to send their wares. and the son of the promise is sold into the hands of those who rejected the promise, right, in one sense. More pieces of this foreshadowing going on. They take his many-colored coat, they put some blood from a sheep or a goat on it, and now there's blood on the rainbow, right? Blood on the sign of remembrance. All these pieces are pointing forward to the cross. And they take this back to their father, who immediately assumes that his son has been killed by a wild beast and begins to lament and mourn and becomes a little difficult to live with after this time. Well, we leave them in Canaan, and Joseph comes down and is sold to a man named Potiphar, a wealthy man working for Pharaoh, and he is, put in charge of Potiphar's house. And Potiphar's a smart guy. He realizes that everything Joseph does doubles its payback. Like whatever he puts his hand to, there's great success to it. So he just puts him in charge of more and more stuff, and eventually Joseph is running the entire household. It's only one problem. Potiphar's wife also has, why? I don't know. She is lusty. She is unsatisfied in her marriage or otherwise, and decides that Joseph is her new thing, her new toy. So she begins to pursue him, and he is able to say no to her several times. She keeps saying, to quote it, "Lie with me." And he keeps saying, no, my master has given me charge of everything except for you. Right? You're the only thing that I don't get to do what I want with in his house. I'm not going to take you, his wife, and sin against God, he says. Now, I love this. Sin against God, is the sin there the adultery? Well, yes, but what's the real sin against God? The sin against authority, right? That he would betray his master's office and take his master's things. Well, she one more time gets him alone in a room, kind of traps him, and as he's trying to get away, she grabs his coat, and it comes off him, and it implies this is most of his clothing comes off as he's escaping. And she's now spurned and calls out to all the other servants, look, he tried to take me. He tried to make me his without permission, but I have his coat as proof. And when Potiphar comes home, the same thing is told to him, and of course, the guy's in a rage. You would be too. And he takes Joseph, won't hear a word of it, throws him into prison. Happens to be Pharaoh's prison because, again, Potiphar works for Pharaoh. He's there for quite a while. I didn't look at the number closely. 7 years? Something like that? Quite a while in prison. Which, back in the pit again. I'm going to do one quick aside. It's very easy to assume that Pharaoh and Egypt right now in the story are the picture of Egypt that we have from kind of growing up and being taught it in school. Pyramids are built, Pharaoh's full of money and owns everything as far as the eye can see. I don't think that's the case. That happens during Joseph's later life when, and we'll talk about this, I don't want to give away all of it, although I know you know the story, the wealth of Egypt is going to be grown by Joseph specifically and put into the hands of Pharaoh. There also are two dynasties that come and go. Well, this one and the next one come and go before the third dynasty that's during the time of Moses. And so there's even a rising and falling of kingdoms of pharaohs going on in here. And the real height of the power is during the time of Moses, which is 300 years later, something like that. So even though he's working for Pharaoh, thrown in Pharaoh's prison, don't assume this is quite the Egypt of great lore. It's growing, but it's not there yet. While in prison, there's two prisoners there who are from Pharaoh's immediate surroundings, a chef and a cupbearer, waiter, server, taster, making sure there's no poison, stuff like that. And they both have bad dreams on the same night. And one dreams about baking bread and having crows eat it. The other one dreams about giving the cup again to Pharaoh. And they both are full of symbolism. Well, Joseph hears them tell these dreams, and he says, well, you know what? Since I was a kid, I've been able to tell what dreams are from God and what they mean. And so I can tell you what they are. So the cupbearer tells his dream. Long and short of it is, in 3 days, you will be restored to Pharaoh's presence, to Pharaoh's side. Chef says, oh, well, tell me mine. Here it is, basket of bread, crows, yada, yada. Long and short, in 3 days, you're going to be killed. Huh? In 3 days, guess what happens? It all comes true. Cupbearer is restored to Pharaoh's side. Joseph says, when you get there, remember me. Yeah? Quite a few years pass before that happens. Meanwhile, Joseph also has been put in charge of the entire prison. Everything he puts his hand to succeeds. The prison runner realizes this and just keeps giving him more to do. He's in charge of the entire prison. And it's later, though, years later, that Pharaoh also has a dream. And he has two, actually, and they're kind of the same. One is that there are 7 bountiful sheaths of grain that he sees by the Nile. And then there rise up 7 sick sheaths of grain that then absorb and consume the first 7. And then he sees 7 fat, gorgeous cows. And when we say gorgeous, we mean for cutting them and eating them, right? Gorgeous cows, and then 7 sickly, scrawny cows that eat up the fat cows and remain scrawny. And this is a nightmare. He really is bothered by this dream, and he asks all the people in the country that are famous for interpreting dreams, his magicians, to tell him what it means, and nobody can tell him what it means. That should also ring a bell in that that's going to happen again with Daniel and his life. There's sort of a second repetition that goes on there. Anyway, it's at this point that the cupbearer remembers Joseph and says, I knew this guy. He was in jail when you were mad at me, Pharaoh. Let's not remember that. But can we bring this guy up? Maybe he can tell you what your dreams mean. Joseph comes up, hears the dream, and says, oh, yeah, I know exactly what that means. In fact, I know that because it happened twice in a row, it means it's a certain thing, and God will not revoke what he said is going to happen. But just one time, God could change his mind. And then what it means is there's going to be 7 years of bumper crops, bountiful amounts of food, more food than you can possibly eat. It's going to be the best time of harvest ever in Egypt. But then there's going to be 7 years of famine, so bad and so awful that it won't matter what you had from the first 7. It's all going to go away, and it's going to leave the entire land in a catastrophe. And Pharaoh, if you're smart, what you'll do is during these 7 years of tremendous crops, you'll appoint one guy to be in charge of taking taxes from all of it and storing it and making sure there's plenty to be had during those other 7 years. And Pharaoh's like, wonder who could do that. Joseph's like, He appoints Joseph to do it. Puts a ring on his finger. He's making him a member of his household. Makes him really like in the place of a son. Sort of and again, the Egyptians do see Pharaoh as from the sun god, Ra, making Joseph to be one as the son of God. Again, add this to the picture that's been built so far. And we'll try to recap that when we get to the end. Puts a ring on his finger, gives him power over everything. He's second in Egypt. He says, you'll run the country, I'm going to go golf. Yeah? And I don't know what he actually did, but he really did just let Joseph run the country. Who knows what Pharaoh was doing. Joseph begins to immediately bring in taxes, and he stores up for the time of famine. The time of famine comes, and it gets pretty bad. It gets pretty bad even up in Canaan, and even especially up in Canaan, where Joseph's brothers and family are. And mind you, this is like the first year. This is not late in the famine. This is right away. And Jacob says, well, I hear that they have food down in Egypt. Go down there and, I should check our time, go down there and get food for us. Take some clothing or whatever they would trade. Take it down there and trade it for food, some money for food. And so they go, but only 10 of them go. Benjamin stays behind. Wonder why? Yeah, he's the last piece of Rachel that Jacob has left. He won't let Benjamin out of his sight. But the 10 go down, and they're in line with all these people that are flocking to Egypt to buy food there, and Joseph is like there. He's watching over all of it every day and continuing to manage it, and he sees them, and he knows who they are. They don't know who he is. And he's got the big things on his head, and his eyes are painted black and whatever. He looks like an Egyptian. They don't know who he is. So he calls them in front of him, and he says, I know who you guys are. Well, how do you know us? You're spies. You're spies that are here to steal from us and plot to overthrow us. Oh, no, 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 no. We're just humble sheep herders from the north. We're here to buy some food. I don't think so. I think you're spies. No, 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 no. We promise. Our father is up there. We have another brother up there. And we got to go back and bring them food, or all our families are going to die. You have a brother? Why isn't he with you? Oh, our father loves him very much and wouldn't let him come. I'm not sure I believe you. Tell you what, I'll give you a chance. You go back and bring your brother down, and then I'll believe you. I'll give you all that you need. We don't think we can do that. Well, then I'm going to throw you all in jail. We'll try. Well, then I'm going to take one of you, put you in jail, just one. And I think now it's Levi. Am I right about that? I think it's Levi. Is it? The one, who do you think it is? Judah? No, Judah goes back for sure. I think it's Levi. Anyway, one of them gets left in jail. The rest go back. Oh, and they get food as they go. And Joseph has them put all their money back in their sacks. So they get a day's ride out, and they check their sacks, and they find their money in it. And they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? What has God done to us? Yeah, they think they're going to be killed. Well, they get back up to Jacob. They tell him everything. They tell him that they got to bring Benjamin down or their brother can't come back. And Jacob's like, are you kidding me? Why did you tell him he had a brother? What kind of idiots are you? Well, he pressed us. We were nervous. Well, Jacob won't do it. He'll leave his other son in jail. And again, Simeon, thank you. Oh, his secondborn, who he has no special love for, you'll notice. Yeah, because he's the one who killed all the men. Leaves his other brother in jail. And time goes by, but the food runs out. And so when the food runs out, I don't know, is Jacob getting senile? Hey guys, go down to Egypt, get some food. This is what he says. Why is he forgetting that they can't go down? And they're like, Dad, we can't go down. He said, don't ever show up again unless you've got your brother with you. And, well, you can't do that. Well, they press him pretty hard on this. Reuben almost gets sacrificial or atonement-like and says, well, tell you what, you let me take Benjamin down, and if I come back without Benjamin, you can have my two sons and kill them both as punishment. Almost putting himself forward, not quite, right? Almost. And then this isn't enough. Jacob won't take this either. So Judah is the one that then pipes up and says, I will be myself a pledge for him. I will take personal responsibility for Benjamin. They end up finally convincing Jacob to let Benjamin go down. They go down, and they're called in to meet with Joseph again, and he sees Benjamin, and he can barely take it. Like he's just about to lose it. At one point in the conversation, he has to leave the room and come back because he can't control himself. And think about this, right? He knew by this time in his life why they had sold him. He knew, he'd put together why they did not like him, because he was favored and because he was Rachel's only son and the only connection to Rachel. And they'd always been jealous of not being Rachel's kids. And so he knows Benjamin is the only one left, and he sees them all show up and there's only 10 of them. What's he think they did to Benjamin? They killed him too, right? So it's no wonder he's intense about this. Like, my brother's alive. Yeah. They have a feast. He throws this big feast. I mean, he's just lavishing grace upon them. Amazing gifts. He fills up their sacks again. He lets Simeon out. Imagine Simeon's been sitting in jail for a year or two, and what's that like? You're in a dark prison for 2 years, right? One day the door opens. You got hair all over your face, you're dirty, right? Next thing you know, they're bathing you, and they're cutting your hair, and they're putting oil on you, and you walk out, and there's your brothers, and you're just, you're reborn, right? What an amazing, horribly amazing thing to go through. They get their money put back in their sacks and the food put in their sacks without their knowing about it, and are sent off again, and are told, bring your father down. I would like to meet your father. But there's one more thing. Now, and I still can't quite figure out what Joseph is doing. But it ends up working out. But I can't tell. Is he vengeful at this point? Or is he simply testing them? And of course, the standard Christian view would be that he's just testing them, right? Well, that's nice, and maybe that's true. But I'm looking for, real humanity here. And part of me wants to think he's actually spiting his older brothers at this point. Now, I don't know. It's hard to say. The text doesn't really tell us. He does put his own personal cup into Benjamin's sack. And when they're a day out this time, they find their money in the sacks, but they also find the Egyptians on their heels saying, "Why have you stolen from Pharaoh?" What do you mean? We haven't stolen from Pharaoh. Oh, let's open your sacks and we'll find Pharaoh's cup that we know you stole. Oh, we didn't steal Pharaoh's cup. Yeah, of course. You can search, and wherever you find it, you can kill that guy right here on the spot. We're that convinced that we didn't do it. Huh? So you imagine they go through each sack, they do Benjamin's last, and out comes the cup. Oh, Judah and Reuben's faces at that point, right? What did they give up pledge for, right? The servant says, "We're going to take this man back. You guys can go. We're taking him. You can't have him." "Oh, no, you can't. Our father will die if he doesn't have Benjamin, if he's not brought back to us." They come and they talk to Joseph about this too. And Joseph is like, "No, I'm going to keep this man. This is what we said to you. You've broken our agreement and our friendship, and you cannot have him." And this is where Judah, the one who gets the promise eventually, steps in and says, No, take me. Take me. Kill me instead. Right? For one righteous man, will you spare the city? Yeah? Joseph breaks down again. He finally says, "It's me, guys. It's Joseph." What? Nah. Yeah, it's Joseph. It's me. I'm in charge of everything. Go get Dad. Bring him down. Everything's going to be fine. Who knows what that would have been like, what kind of family reunion that was like. Clearly, eventually they come to believe it, and there's joy among them, and they're excited to see him again. They're not just because they're released from the potential death that they were all going to see in Benjamin, but they're glad to see Joseph again. And there's a picture there even of restoration and forgiveness within the family. Now, I don't want to get ahead of our text like we did last time. Oh, we did. Maybe we didn't. Hold on. Here we go. 46:18. No, okay, yeah. We're good. Sorry. No. Go to Genesis 44:18. This is Judah's moment. Then Judah went up to him, that's to Joseph, and said, "O my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not your anger burn against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself." We're going to skip, it's very long, we're going to skip to verse 30. "Now therefore, as soon as I come to your servant my father, and the boy," that's Benjamin, "is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant our father with sorrow to Sheol," as to the pit, to death. "For your servant became," that's me, Judah, "a pledge of safety for the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father and all my life. Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father." No thoughts of that when he threw Joseph in the pit, right? And now a change has come over him. 45:1, "Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, 'Make everyone go out from me.' So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, 'I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?' But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence." Right? Like one raised from the dead. So Joseph said to his brothers, "Come near to me, please." And they came near. God, do you hear it? There was this upper room where the disciples were locked for fear of the Jews, and Jesus appeared among them and said, "Peace be to you," right? and they didn't believe it, right? One of them refused to believe it. Unless I come near to him, unless I put my hands in his side and in the wounds of his wrists, I will not believe. Jesus said, Thomas, come near to me. Yeah? There's a ring of that here. Come near to me. And I should just do this right now. So, typology. The type and the anti-type. The foreshadowing and the fulfillment. It's almost never perfectly overlapping, but there's this space of overlap, right? Where Jesus is doing whatever's going on in the Old Testament and is there. His story is there in that shadow overlap in between. And that's what I'm calling out here again, even as he says, come near to me, and has to convince them that it's really him and he's not a ghost, right? This is the same thing that Jesus did. Only Jesus is the full fulfillment, because where you have Joseph overlapping here, you have David overlapping, you have Abraham overlapping, you have Solomon. All these stories that we go through, there's overlaps with all of them, and Jesus is the fulfillment of every single one. Come near to me, please. They came near, and he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now these words are beautiful. Now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me before you to preserve life. Right? Jesus risen from the dead. All that the Scriptures spoke of the Son of Man had to be fulfilled, that he would die and rise for the life of the world. Right? God had to put us through this, had to put me specifically through Sheol, through death, in order to bring about life for many people. And here Joseph is saying almost the same thing, having gone through death in order to bring about life for many people. Yeah, just his life is temporal. It's temporary. Bringing bread to the people. Oh, there's an image there as well, though. For the famine has been, verse 6, famine has been in this land these 2 years. There are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And yet God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and lord of all his house and ruler over the land of Egypt. Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord. All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Go. Same thing. He has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. So Joseph brings his father down and his family down. There's a big reuniting going on. Pharaoh's real excited about this. Joseph's dad came. This is great. We're going to party, kind of thing. Time goes by. They dwell in a good bit of land called Goshen, some of the prime land for having their flocks be there. And Jacob eventually gets near to death. As this happens, all of his sons rightly are concerned about the blessing. Not only the inheritance as a family, but their belief that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has words to say to them that their fathers as prophets can give them, which will come true. Joseph brings his 2 sons, who he had by an Egyptian woman named Ephraim and Manasseh, to Jacob. And Jacob says, I'm going to give a double blessing to you, Joseph, so that you won't even be my son. These 2 are my sons. They get elevated to the level of sons. And so they'll get as much as your brothers do. They'll be a step ahead of all of their cousins, as it were. And he blesses them so that they will be tremendously fruitful and multiply. And you see this happening later as the tribes of Israel do go into the land of Egypt, or land of Canaan. The land portion that Joseph, as a house, gets is huge. And Ephraim and Manasseh are 2 of the largest groups of people that exist, just tremendously populous. And warlike and powerful as well. Sadly, they also become some of the first to fall away from the northern tribes. But after the blessing of Ephraim and Manasseh, in which the second born is blessed first, Jacob crosses his hands, really kind of weird thing going on there. the blessing is given to the rest of the family. And I want to read through some of that so that you see this part going on here. The removal of the top three in place of Judah. And it's very clear in Jacob's words why he is not giving them the ultimate promise. It starts at 49, verse 2 and following. And Jacob's got all his sons with him. Assemble and listen, O sons of Jacob, listen to Israel, your father. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the firstfruits of my strength, prominent in dignity and preeminent in power, unstable as water. You shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it. And then for emphasis, he went up to my couch. That's it. That's all he gets. Yeah, you get nothing. Now, he's still a member of the tribe, right? He'll still get a portion in the land, but he has lost his right as a firstborn. Next, together, it is Levi. Ha, I was right. Yay. Simeon, oh no, you were right. I was wrong. Simeon and Levi are brothers. Weapons of violence are their swords, right? They went into the city and they killed the men who we'd made a covenant with, who we'd brought into the church. And we brought them into the covenant promise with us, and you went and killed them. Let my soul come not into their counsel. O my glory, be not joined to their company. For in their anger they killed men, and in their willfulness they hamstrung oxen. Cursed be their anger, for it is fierce, and their wrath, for it is cruel. I will divide them in Jacob and scatter them in Israel. They lose the promise. They lose the right to be the next in line and heirs of the covenant seed. Fourthborn, Judah. Judah, your brothers shall praise you. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Oh, I got to stop there, right? I will send a seed born of woman. You shall bruise his heel. Yeah, he shall crush your head. Right? It's not his hand on the neck of his enemies, but his foot on the neck of his enemy. Right? Again, overlap. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's cub, and the prey, my son, you have gone up. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He stooped down, he crouched as a lion, and as a lioness, who dares rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until tribute comes to him, and to him shall be the obedience of the peoples. Binding his foal to the vine and his donkey's colt to the choice vine, he has washed his garments in wine and his vesture in the blood of grapes. Again, blood on his coat, scepter in his hand. His rule shall not cease until peoples bow down to him. Right? Psalm 2 talks about this, that with a rod of iron the Son of Man shall rule the nations and dash them together like pieces of pottery. That too is all about Christ, who right now, above heaven and earth, even at this moment, is in charge of everything and is moving all of history to bring us to that last day where all people are going to bow down and acknowledge him as Lord and God. First of all, and most especially those of us who have believed in his coming, and so are righteous by the blood of his cloak, which he throws over us to hide us. His eyes are darker than wine, his teeth whiter than milk. Prophecy, covenant, pushing forward to the cross, that from Judah's line is going to come this man here. Partially, we're going to get to this, 10 of these guys' families just vanish in the exile. They get destroyed and never come back. Judah and Benjamin are all that survive the exile. We'll talk about that. But of the tribe of Judah is a pretty important thing for Jesus. Last. So after Israel dies, his brothers get a little nervous. Joseph's brothers get a little nervous. It could be that Joseph was nice to us simply for the sake of Dad. He wanted to see Benjamin. He wanted to see Dad, and so that's why he didn't do anything to us. But now, the guy's king, and maybe he's going to do something to us. So let's go to him and say that before Dad died, he made us say we would tell you not to kill us. Yeah? And that's what I want to look at here. I'll zoom in on this text as well. This is Genesis 50, 15 and following. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin because they did evil to you. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.'" Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers came also and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God?" When Jesus comes into the room, that upper room, and says, "Peace be with you, do not fear," am I in the place of God? The answer is yes. Yeah? That's the distinction between type and anti-type. That Jesus asked the same question. Who do you say that I am? You're a Christ, the Son of the living God. The answer is yes, I'm in the place of God. Now, Joseph is not. But even so, Jesus in the place of God, verse 20, "As for you, you meant evil against me." That's the cross. We didn't crucify him for our salvation. We crucified him to get rid of him. We couldn't stand what he said. He spoke too clearly. His word of truth on righteousness was too spot on. It showed us all to be the betrayers that we are. And we tried to get him off the soil. We couldn't even stand having him on the dirt. We threw him back up to heaven with nails. As for you, you meant it for evil. But God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. And this is Christ preaching from the resurrection. This is what Paul means when he says that he was crucified for our transgressions and that he has now justified all people by this death and resurrection in our place. The Old Testament preaches the same gospel, and it does it not only by these very clear historical covenants pointing forward, but the fact that all the way through the covenant there are stories in which mercy has to be shown by the one who has no right giving mercy in a sense, or you wouldn't think mercy would come from. All these pictures that now a man who is the son of God on earth, son of Pharaoh, formerly dressed in the sign of the covenant, bloodied with the lamb's blood, gone into death, appearing raised from the dead, says, "I did it all for the good of all people." God did this for your life. It's beautiful, beautiful picture of Christ. Really happened. Joseph really did all this too. It's real history, right? Not just a story. But if you can't see the Old Testament doing this, the book is just, it remains closed to you as a Christian. You'll go in it and you'll find all these rules in Leviticus. You know we're not supposed to wear different kinds of clothing? Like that has mixed threads. Why aren't we doing that, Pastor? Well, it's the old covenant, right? That ended. Pastor Rosso speaks about that in the sermon today. But what do we do? What is that meat of Melchizedek that we were talking about a couple weeks ago? The meat of Melchizedek is seeing that all these things are pointing forward to that final, total bringing together of all the foreshadowed images in one man, one person, our Lord Jesus. So that rather than looking through a dim, cloudy mirror, we see it clearly as it is. There's no question about truth in the Messiah now. It's all been revealed. It's established. It's not going to change. That's really comforting, yeah? Getting to see it all. Verse 21, "So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. This promise is for you and your children, Acts chapter 2. So Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. He lived 110 years. He saw Ephraim's children of the third generation, the children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh. He dies. 25, he makes the sons of Israel swear, "God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here." So he died. He says, God shall visit you. He will remember and come and take you back to the land. And when you go back to the land, take my body with you to put me beside Abraham in his grave, which actually happens much later in Exodus, which is what we're going to start next week. We're going to take 2 weeks on Moses because there's just so much there. Big picture. That's what we're all about right now, is big picture. So I hope that is being seen, and I thank you for your time. Let's close with prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Lord God in heaven, we thank you for the sign you have placed upon us, that we have cloaks drenched in the blood of Christ, made white by his scarlet passion and his atonement for our sins. We ask you to open our eyes, that wherever we would look in Scripture, we would see this pushing forward and pushing of all things to that moment on Calvary, where he was crowned King of Kings and Lord of Lords. We ask you to keep us in this faith until he returns. Let us not be deceived by the world or by our own desires. And make us here at Bethany a place that rejoices to confess this, that these words would be on our lips, so that our neighbors also might hear and join us at this feast and the feast in the world to come. We pray these things for Jesus' sake. Amen. Thank you.